My husband looked me dead in the eyes and said, "My ex will always come first. Get used to it." And I didn't know my life was about to change in that exact second, because he said it with the kind of certainty that sounds like a rule, not a mistake. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't even argue. I just nodded slowly and replied, "Understood." He relaxed, like he'd won, like the conversation was over, like understood meant I was finally falling in line. What he didn't realize was that I wasn't surrendering. I was translating. I'm 35, and I've been married for 6 years. I met him when I was 27, got engaged at 29, married at 30. We have a 4-year-old son. On paper, we look like the life everyone's supposed to want. Stable jobs, a nice house in the suburbs, one family vacation a year, the kind of photos that make relatives comment heart emojis. But underneath all that, something had been rotting for longer than I wanted to admit. His ex-wife was where it started and where it ended. He'd been married before me. A brief marriage that lasted 2 years, ended when he was 26. No kids from that relationship. When we started dating, he framed it like a clean ending. Married young, realized they weren't compatible, divorced amicably. I respected the honesty. People have pasts. I wasn't going to punish him for one. What I didn't know was that amicably meant they still talked every single day. I found out about a month into our relationship when his phone buzzed during dinner and he smiled at the screen like it was a private comfort. "My ex," he said casually, like he was talking about a coworker. I remember my stomach tightening as I asked, "You guys still talk?" And he answered, "Of course," like I'd asked something naive. "We were together for 4 years total, married for 2. You don't just cut someone out after that." I told myself it was mature. I told myself I was secure. I told myself adults could stay friends with exes. And then I built a whole marriage on top of that lie. So when he finally said the quiet truth out loud, "My ex will always come first," I understood exactly what he meant. That weekend, I made a single call I'd never planned to make. And by Monday morning, he realized he'd underestimated what understood really meant. When I look back now, it's not the big moments that feel heavy. It's the small ones I dismissed because I wanted so badly for things to work. I was 27 when I met my husband. He was charming in a grounded, dependable way, the kind of man people trusted quickly. We met through mutual friends at a low-key gathering. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. He listened when I spoke. He remembered details. After years of dating men who felt emotionally unavailable, that consistency felt like safety. I worked hard, valued structure, believed in building something slowly. He seemed the same. Our relationship progressed naturally. Dates turned into weekends together. Weekends turned into living out of each other's closets. 2 years later, he proposed. A simple ring, thoughtfully chosen. I said yes without hesitation because at that point, I believed we were aligned in all the ways that mattered. When we married at 30, it felt earned. We weren't reckless. We weren't impulsive. We had careers. We had plans. When our son was born 2 years later, I truly believed we'd crossed into that phase of life where stability replaces uncertainty. What I didn't realize was how much emotional space in my marriage was already occupied. From the beginning, his ex-wife was present in ways that felt invisible but constant. Daily texts, long phone calls, updates about her work stress, her family issues, her dating life. It wasn't flirtatious on the surface. That's what made it so hard to challenge. It lived in that gray area where concern can masquerade as loyalty. I remember asking him early on, gently, "Do you think it's a bit much how often you two talk?" He shut it down quickly. "She's one of my closest friends. That's not changing." There was no room for discussion, just a boundary already drawn, and I was standing on the wrong side of it. I didn't want to be the jealous girlfriend. I didn't want to seem insecure, so I adapted. I learned to pause conversations when his phone buzzed. I learned to eat dinner while he typed. I learned to tell myself that emotional intimacy didn't count if there was no physical betrayal. We got engaged, the calls continued. We got married, the calls continued. We had our son, the calls continued. His family never questioned it. If anything, they treated it like a quirk of his personality. "He's loyal," his mother once said, like that explained everything. Loyalty, I learned, can be selective. I tried to focus on what we had, the house, the routines, the life we were building. But slowly, subtly, I started to feel like I was sharing my husband with someone who didn't live in our home, but never really left our marriage either. At the time, I couldn't name it as a problem. I just knew something felt off. And I kept telling myself that if I loved him enough, if I was patient enough, eventually I'd become the priority. I didn't understand then that some people never reorder their loyalties. They just expect you to accept your place beneath them. The problem with living in a slow erosion is that you don't notice the damage until something finally collapses. At first, his constant contact with his ex-wife blended into the background of our lives. A phone buzzing on the counter, a quick reply while we were watching TV, a call he stepped into the other room to take. I told myself it was harmless because it didn't look dramatic. There were no secret passwords, no late-night disappearances, no obvious lies. What there was, instead, was consistency. Morning texts before he even said good morning to me. Long conversations in the afternoon while I was at work. Calls at night that stretched on until our son was already asleep. He knew the details of her day in a way that felt intimate. Her frustrations, her plans, her dating stories. He'd laugh softly, shake his head, and say things like, "She's having a hard time," or "She just needs someone to talk to." That someone was always him. The first time I really felt something shift was 6 months into our marriage. We were sitting on the couch, our son asleep upstairs, when his phone lit up again. I watched him glance down, smile, and immediately start typing. I waited. Minutes passed. Finally, I asked, "Is everything okay?" "Yeah," he said without looking up. "Just talking to her." I felt a quiet knot form in my stomach. "Do you ever think about how this looks?" He frowned, annoyed. "How what looks?" "You talk to her more than you talk to me some days," I said, keeping my voice calm. "She's your ex-wife." He put his phone down sharply. "And she's my friend. I'm not cutting her out of my life. If that's a problem, that's on you." That was the first time I felt the ground shift under my feet. After that, I noticed more. How he'd step away from family dinners to take her calls. How he'd cancel plans with me because she needed him. How he seemed more emotionally available to her than he was to me. When I brought it up, he accused me of being dramatic, of trying to control him, of creating problems where there were none. His friends didn't help. One of them laughed and said, "At least you know he's loyal." His mother brushed it off as history. "They went through a lot together," she said. "That kind of bond doesn't just disappear." I started questioning myself. Was I being unreasonable? Was this what maturity looked like? Was I asking him to erase part of his past instead of accepting it? So I stayed quiet more often. I chose my words carefully. I waited for better moments that never came. And every time I swallowed my discomfort, something in me hardened, just a little more. The house still looked like a home. We still did the routines. Work, daycare, dinner, bedtime stories. But emotionally, there was a third person in our marriage who never left, never slept, never stopped taking up space. I wasn't competing for his time anymore. I was competing for his priority. And the longer that went on, the clearer it became that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a hierarchy. The moment that finally broke me didn't happen during a fight. It didn't happen after a discovery or a confession. It happened on an ordinary night, in our own living room, with our son burning up in my arms. It was 3 weeks ago. Our son had been fine all day, a little tired but playful. By evening, his cheeks were flushed, his body unusually warm. I took his temperature once, then again, hoping I'd read it wrong. 103 degrees. My heart dropped instantly. Any parent knows that feeling. The sudden switch from routine to panic. My husband and I moved quickly, but in different directions. I grabbed my phone, searching symptoms, urgent care hours, anything that could help me decide what to do next. He took the thermometer again, frowning, pacing slightly. Our son whimpered, curling into his chest. And then his phone rang. I recognized the ringtone immediately. His ex-wife. He didn't hesitate. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" I froze. Our child was sick, trembling, eyes glassy with fever, and my husband was greeting another woman like this was any other evening. I stared at him, waiting for him to realize how wrong this was. He didn't. "Oh, wow, that sounds rough," he said into the phone. Yeah, I can talk for a bit." I stood up. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. He covered the phone with his hand, irritation flashing across his face. "What?" "Our son has a fever," I said, "and you're taking a call from her." "It'll just be a minute," he replied. "She's dealing with something." "So are we," I said. He looked at me like I was being unreasonable, like I was interrupting something important. Then he walked into the other room and closed the door. He talked to her for 20 minutes. 20 minutes while I held our son, tried to calm him, tried to decide whether we needed to rush him to urgent care or wait and monitor. 20 minutes where I was completely alone in a moment that should have belonged to both of us. When he finally came back, our son had fallen asleep in my arms, exhausted. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I looked at my husband and said calmly, "This has to stop." "What has to stop?" he asked. "Him," I said. "You dropping everything for her. You prioritizing her over our family." "I'm not prioritizing her," he said defensively. "I was just being a good friend." "She's not your friend," I replied. "She's your ex-wife, and you talk to her more than you talk to me." "That's not true," he snapped. "When was the last time we had a conversation longer than 5 minutes without you checking your phone?" I asked. He didn't answer. "I'm done competing with her," I continued. "You need to set boundaries." His face hardened immediately. "I'm not setting boundaries with someone who's been in my life longer than you have." There it was. "She's your ex," I said quietly. "She's my friend," he replied, "and she's not going anywhere." "Then maybe you should have stayed married to her," I said. "Don't do that," he warned. "Don't make me choose." "I'm not making you choose," I said. "I'm asking you to act like you're married to me, not her." We fought for 2 hours that night. Not loudly, not violently, but relentlessly. The kind of argument that strips away denial and leaves only truth behind. We went to bed angry. We woke up angry. We avoided each other for 3 days, living in the same house like strangers. Then last Thursday, everything came to a head. I came home from work around 6. He was in the kitchen making dinner. Our son was playing on the floor. I tried to be civil, asked about his day. One-word answers, "Fine." I went upstairs to change. When I came back down, he was on the phone again. With her. Something inside me snapped. "Are you kidding me right now?" I said. He held up a finger, the universal wait gesture, like I was interrupting something important. He turned away from me and kept talking. I walked over and stood directly in front of him. He turned his body, still speaking. I reached out and gently took the phone from his hand. Not aggressively, just removed it from the conversation. "I need to call you back," I said into the phone, then hung up. He exploded. "What is wrong with you?" he shouted. "You can't just hang up on people." "Watch me," I said. He was in the middle of telling me something important. "I don't care," I replied. "That's the problem," he said. "You don't care about anyone but yourself." "I don't care about him," I said. "There's a difference." "He's important to me," my husband said. "More important than me?" I asked. "More important than our son?" He went quiet. Then he looked at me with something cold in his eyes and said the words that ended everything. "My ex will always come first. Get used to it." I stared at him, waiting for him to take it back. He didn't. I nodded slowly. "Understood." He smiled, relieved. "Good. Then we can move past this." I walked upstairs, sat on the edge of our bed, and realized my marriage wasn't dying. It was already dead. I'd just finally stopped pretending otherwise. That night, after I walked upstairs, I didn't slam the door. I didn't throw anything. I sat on the edge of our bed, hands resting on my knees, staring at the familiar wall where we'd once talked about paint colors and future plans. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the baby monitor. Our son was asleep, peaceful, unaware that something foundational had just collapsed. I felt numb, not shocked, not hysterical, just hollow in a way that scared me more than anger ever could. My marriage didn't feel like it was ending in that moment. It felt like it had already ended, and I was just finally catching up to the truth. He came upstairs later, acting strangely calm, like we'd resolved something. "You good?" he asked, standing in the doorway. I looked at him and realized how far away he felt. "I'm fine," I said, because I didn't have the energy to explain what not fine would even mean anymore. We slept in the same bed that night, backs turned, a careful distance between us. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying his words over and over. My ex will always come first. Not in anger, not in a slip of the tongue. He'd said it clearly, deliberately, and when I accepted it, he'd smiled. That was what stayed with me. The next 3 days passed in an eerie silence. We went through the motions. Work, daycare, dinner, small talk about logistics. Nothing about us. Nothing about what had been said. It was like we'd both agreed, without saying it out loud, to avoid the truth sitting between us. Inside, I was unraveling. I started questioning myself in ways that felt exhausting. Had I ignored this for too long? Had I enabled it by staying quiet, by trying to be understanding, by convincing myself that being chosen didn't have to look obvious? I replayed every moment I'd swallowed my discomfort just to keep the peace. And then something shifted. The self-blame stopped turning inward and started turning into clarity. I wasn't asking for perfection. I wasn't asking him to erase his past. I was asking him to act like a husband, to show up when our child was sick, to protect our marriage from emotional intrusion, to choose the family he built instead of the one he left behind. And he had refused. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me calm, dangerously calm. By Sunday night, I was quiet in a way he noticed. I wasn't distant. I wasn't cold. I was resolved. He mistook it for acceptance. "You've been quiet all weekend," he said, sitting beside me on the couch. "Everything okay?" I looked straight ahead, just thinking about the future. He smiled, actually smiled, like he thought I'd finally understood my place. "I'm glad you're coming around." "Yeah," I said softly. "Me too." That night, after he went to bed, I sat alone in the living room and made a decision that felt heavier than anything I'd ever done. Not impulsive, not emotional, intentional. The next morning, I woke up at 5, showered, got dressed in my best suit. He noticed as I poured coffee. "Why are you so dressed up?" he asked. "No big meetings on your calendar." "Just felt like looking sharp," I replied. I dropped our son off at daycare, kissed his forehead longer than usual, told him I loved him. Then I got in my car and drove somewhere I never thought I'd need to go. That was my first act of choosing myself. And once I started, I didn't stop. I drove to the lawyer's office with my hands steady on the wheel and my heart doing something strange. It wasn't racing. It wasn't panicking. It was focused, like it finally understood its job. The consultation lasted 2 hours. I laid everything out. The constant contact with his ex-wife, the daily calls, the way he dropped everything for her, even when our son was sick. The sentence that finally ended it. My ex will always come first. I watched the lawyer's pen pause slightly when I repeated those words. He didn't interrupt me. He didn't rush me. He asked clarifying questions, precise and unemotional. "Do you have documentation?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Text messages, call logs, screenshots, years of them." "That helps," he said. "It establishes a pattern." When we talked about custody, my stomach tightened. Courts favored joint custody unless there was clear evidence of unfitness. Was my husband a bad father? No. That truth hurt more than any accusation could have. He loved our son. He just hadn't protected our marriage. "You're likely looking at a 50-50 split," the lawyer said, "possibly alternating weeks." The idea of being away from my son half the time made my chest ache, but the thought of staying in a marriage where I was second place made me feel physically sick. I chose the pain that didn't require me to disappear. I left the office at 10:30 a.m. and drove aimlessly for an hour. I couldn't go home yet. I wasn't ready to face him. I pulled into a coffee shop parking lot and sat there with the engine running, staring at nothing. My phone rang. "Where are you?" my husband asked. "You didn't come home after drop-off." "I had an errand," I said. "What errand?" "Something I needed to take care of." "You're being weird," he said. "I'll be home soon," I replied, and hung up before he could push further. When I walked back into the house, he was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed. "What's going on with you?" he demanded. I set my keys on the counter and looked at him directly. "I saw a lawyer this morning." His face drained of color. "What?" "A divorce lawyer," I said. "I'm filing." He laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "You're joking." "I'm not." "Because of my ex?" he said. "Because I won't cut her out of my life?" "Because you told me she would always come first," I replied. "And I believed you." "I didn't mean it like that," he said quickly. "How did you mean it?" I asked. He faltered. Words failed him for the first time in years. "I just meant she's important to me," he said finally. "That's exactly what it means," I said. "Your words always come first." He started crying then, begging, telling me to think about our son, promising to set boundaries now, to talk to her less, to fix it. "I don't want you to change because I'm threatening divorce," I said quietly. "I wanted you to change because you were my husband and I asked you to. You chose her. Now I'm choosing me." That was when the escalation truly began. He accused me of throwing away our family over a friendship. His tone shifted from pleading to angry, from regret to blame. That night, I packed a bag, clothes, laptop, chargers. I told him I was going to a hotel. My lawyer had advised me not to leave permanently until custody was addressed, but I couldn't stay there another night. "You're being cruel," he said as I walked out. "I'm being done," I replied. The hotel room felt sterile and quiet. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I finally let myself feel everything I'd been holding back: the anger, the betrayal, the strange relief of no longer pretending. My phone exploded that night. Calls, texts, voicemails. He told me I was overreacting. Then he told me I was ruining our son's life. Then he told me he'd never forgive me. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls. I didn't call him back. I called my lawyer. The lowest point didn't come the night I left the house. It came the morning after, when the adrenaline wore off and the reality settled into my bones. I woke up alone in that hotel room, staring at a ceiling that wasn't mine, listening to silence that felt too loud. For the first time since I'd made the decision, fear crept in. Not fear of him, fear of what this would cost me. My phone was full of messages I hadn't answered. His name filled the screen in angry blocks of missed calls and voicemails. I didn't listen to them. I already knew the pattern. Apology, blame, threat, guilt, repeat. I showered, dressed, and tried to work from the small desk by the window, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every few minutes, my mind drifted back to one thing: my son. The thought of being away from him half the time sat in my chest like a weight I couldn't move. I wondered if I was doing the right thing. I wondered if staying would have been easier. I wondered how many women before me had talked themselves into silence for the sake of peace. Around mid-morning, my phone rang again. This time it was his mother. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she snapped the moment I answered. "He's falling apart." She called me crying, saying you're divorcing her over nothing. "It's not nothing," I said calmly. "She said you're jealous, that you can't handle her having male friends." "He's not a friend," I replied. "He's her ex-husband, and she told me he would always come first." There was a long pause. "She didn't say that," his mother said finally, but her voice had lost its certainty. "She did," I said, word for word. Another pause, then quieter. "I need to talk to her." When the call ended, I sat there shaking, not from fear anymore, but from exhaustion. I was tired of explaining, tired of defending reality, tired of being painted as the problem because I refused to accept being second. That afternoon, my lawyer called. "She's spiraling," he said. "What kind of threats is she making?" I swallowed. "She says I'm abandoning my family, that she'll make sure I regret this." "Document everything," he said. "Don't engage emotionally. Keep communication brief and factual." I followed his advice, even when it hurt. Then, 2 days later, something happened that broke me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I got served papers, a restraining order. She claimed I'd been verbally abusive, that she feared for her safety, that I'd aggressively taken her phone during our argument. My lawyer was furious when I forwarded him the documents. "This is retaliation," he said, "pure and simple." "But it means," my voice cracked. "Yes," he said gently, "it may temporarily affect custody." 2 weeks. 2 weeks without seeing my son. I hung up and sat on the edge of the bed, hands covering my face, chest heaving, as something inside me collapsed. I wanted to scream, to punch a wall, to drive back to the house and demand she stop. Instead, I called my brother. He didn't ask questions. He told me to come over. He let me cry on his couch like I hadn't cried in years. He made me food. He helped me prepare for the hearing. He reminded me over and over that I wasn't crazy. Those 2 weeks were the darkest of my life. Every night, I lay awake, imagining my son asking where I was, wondering if she was already rewriting the story for him, wondering if choosing myself had cost me the one thing I loved most. But even in that darkness, one truth stayed steady. If I went back now, I wouldn't be saving my family. I'd be teaching my son that love means accepting second place. And that was something I refused to do. The turning point came in a room that smelled faintly of old wood and disinfectant, with a seal on the wall and a judge who looked like he'd heard every version of every story 1,000 times before. The hearing was 2 weeks later. 2 weeks without seeing my son had hollowed me out in ways I didn't know were possible. I functioned, barely. Work, sleep, eat, repeat. Every night, I stared at my phone, resisting the urge to text him goodnight, even though I didn't know if he'd get the message. I kept reminding myself why I was here, why I hadn't backed down. When I walked into the courtroom, my legs felt heavy. My husband was already there, sitting beside his lawyer. He wouldn't look at me. His ex-wife wasn't there, but she didn't need to be. She'd already done her part. My lawyer leaned toward me. "Stay calm. Let the evidence speak." And it did. The judge listened as my lawyer presented the text messages, the call logs, the timestamps showing daily contact with his ex-wife over the course of our marriage. Then he played the recording, the one I'd legally made during our final argument, where my husband's voice was clear and unmistakable. "My ex will always come first." The courtroom went quiet. The judge turned to him. Did you say this to your wife? My husband swallowed. I was angry. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it, the judge replied. Yes or no? Yes, he said quietly. And have you maintained regular, ongoing contact with your ex-wife throughout your current marriage? He hesitated. We're friends. That's not what I asked, the judge said calmly. Yes or no? Yes. Something inside me loosened then. Not triumph. Release. The truth was no longer trapped in my chest. It was on the record. The restraining order was dismissed. The judge granted me temporary custody 3 days a week with a warning issued against filing retaliatory or frivolous protective orders. He spoke directly to my husband about the seriousness of weaponizing the legal system during custody disputes. When the gavel came down, my hands were shaking. I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, but because I'd been believed. That afternoon, I picked up my son for the first time in 2 weeks. When he ran into my arms, I held him so tightly he laughed and told me I was squishing him. I didn't let go for a long time. In that moment, everything felt worth it. Every sleepless night, every tear, every doubt. The power had shifted. Not because I had taken anything from my husband, but because I had stopped letting him define reality. For the first time since I said understood, I knew exactly what it had meant. It meant I understood who he was. And I understood what I had to do next. The weeks after the hearing felt like standing in the aftermath of a storm. The noise had stopped, but everything had been rearranged. Some things were broken beyond repair. Others were suddenly clearer than they'd ever been. My husband didn't take the ruling well. At first, he tried to act reasonable, texting me about schedules and logistics in clipped formal sentences like we were co-workers managing a project. But underneath that thin layer of civility, the resentment leaked through. He told mutual friends that the judge had misunderstood, that I had blown things out of proportion, that I was using the legal system to punish him. It didn't land the way he expected. People had seen the pattern for years, the constant calls, the way his phone was never out of reach, the way he'd step away from gatherings to talk to her. Now that the truth was documented, spoken out loud in a courtroom, it couldn't be brushed off as jealousy or insecurity anymore. The narrative he'd relied on quietly collapsed. His family shifted first. His mother, who had once scolded me for overreacting, stopped calling to defend him. When she did reach out, her tone was different. Careful, uncertain. She asked about our son. She didn't mention his ex. The silence around that subject said more than any apology could have. Friends followed. Invitations stopped including him automatically. Conversations grew awkward. A few people reached out to me privately, admitting they'd noticed how much space his ex had taken up in our marriage, but didn't feel it was their place to say anything. Hearing that hurt, but it also confirmed something important. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't been alone in seeing it. I'd just been the only one brave enough to act. He tried one last time to regain control. A week after the hearing, he asked if we could talk without lawyers. I agreed, but only in a public place. Only about co-parenting. He arrived tense, defensive, already rehearsing his points. He talked about how hard this had been on him, how unfair it felt, how much he'd lost. He never asked how I was. When he finally paused, I said calmly, "This isn't about you losing something. It's about me refusing to lose myself." That ended the conversation. From that point on, communication stayed strictly about our son. Pickup times, school events, medical updates, nothing else. Every attempt he made to reopen emotional ground was met with silence or a redirection back to facts. Without my engagement, his anger had nowhere to land. Meanwhile, my own life began to steady. The rhythm of shared custody was painful at first, but it became manageable. On the days my son was with me, I was fully present. On the days he wasn't, I focused on rebuilding the parts of myself I'd neglected. Therapy helped. Long walks helped. Quiet evenings without tension helped most of all. I didn't celebrate his downfall. I didn't need to. The consequences spoke for themselves. His carefully balanced world, built on divided loyalties, couldn't hold once one side refused to keep carrying the weight. I didn't walk away with vengeance. I walked away with clarity. And that clarity changed everything. It's been 4 months now. The divorce was finalized last week. No dramatic courtroom scenes at the end. No last-minute apologies. Just paperwork, signatures, and a quiet acknowledgement that what we had was already gone long before the law caught up to it. We split assets evenly. No alimony. 50-50 custody. Clean on paper, even if it took years off my heart to get there. He moved 2 towns over into a condo. From what I hear through mutual friends, he and his ex-wife are officially together now. I suppose that shouldn't surprise me. When someone tells you who comes first, eventually they stop pretending. I don't feel vindicated by it, just affirmed. The truth always circles back. My son is adjusting. Therapy has helped. The therapist told me something I carry with me on the hard days. Children don't need perfect families. They need honest ones. On the days he's with me, we cook dinner together. We read before bed. We talk about feelings in words a 4-year-old can understand. On the days he's not, I sit with the ache instead of running from it. I remind myself that choosing a healthier environment for him mattered more than preserving a broken one. As for me, I'm doing better than okay. I've started dating someone new. Slowly, carefully. I told him everything up front. No minimizing, no softening the truth. He listened without interrupting, without defending anyone, without telling me how I should feel. When I finished, he said, "Thank you for trusting me with that." That sentence alone felt like healing. My ex texted me once, about 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. "I hope you're happy now." I didn't respond. But yes, I am. Not because everything is easy, not because nothing hurts anymore, but because I no longer live in a marriage where I'm competing with a ghost. I no longer wake up wondering where I rank in my own family. I no longer have to shrink my needs to make room for someone else's unresolved past. Here's what I learned, and this is what I want anyone watching this to hear. When someone tells you where you stand in their life, believe them. Not the version wrapped in apologies, not the version softened by history. The raw, unfiltered truth that comes out when they're angry or cornered. That's the truth that matters. You cannot build a future with someone who refuses to leave the past behind. And you cannot teach your children what love looks like if you're modeling self-abandonment. I tried for 6 years. I didn't fail. I stopped trying to survive something that was already choosing against me. And that wasn't the end of my family. It was the beginning of a healthier one.